The number 2 issue, according to most voters, is the border, immigration, safety, security. Abortion ranks down like number 3 or number 4, Joe. What am I missing here?
Well, and it's manufactured as well because and there's no states that you can't have an abortion that I'm aware of today. I don't know if maybe a state maybe voted it in. That's what the Supreme Court did, is pushed it down to the state level where it should have been from the start, because it's not in the Constitution. They did the Constitutional Act in interpreting Roe v. Wade. It took them 50 years, but they did that, and they said this is a state issue. It's not in the Constitution. They were out of bounds by even ruling on it in the first place, so they fixed that. But there isn't a state that has a problem with that. And by the way, I saw these ads for Kamala Harris during the Olympics. About every other ad seemed like it was Kamala, and she's saying we need to get back to reproductive rights, which are in our Constitution. No, they're not. There's reproductive isn't in there, and reproductive is about having children, not killing them. So the whole thing's it's all make believe. It's something that they feel like I guess they can win on, and to me, it's really sick and evil. I think it's a terrible campaign slogan and effort. It's terrible.
Yeah, I'm in your camp. I mean, we're gonna take a short break here, but Joe, when we come back, I had the privilege today of going on to a website you're very familiar with, the Gateway Pundit, and I believe your brother runs the Gateway Pundit, and you do a lot of writing for the Gateway Pundit. You've got some great articles. I actually printed some material off Gateway Pundit today with observations about last night. And Joe and I are going to get into those observations. We're going to talk a little bit about what the political map looks like. We'll be back in a couple minutes.
Former National Security Advisor Lieutenant General Michael Flynn pleaded guilty today to lying to the FBI.
He was one of the most respected generals in the military.
Every American needs this historical DVD keepsake. Flynn delivered the truth, whatever the cost. Hand signed by General Michael Flynn. Order now at the Patriot TV store. Use promo code PTV at checkout to get special savings. The Patriot TV store, a secure, hassle-free shopping experience.
Throughout history, the spirit of patriotism has prevailed. The battles may have changed, but the values remain the same. Today, in 2024, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment where the call for unity, freedom, and a better future echoes louder than ever. For more than 10 years, Patriot Mobile has been committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service. It's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream. Because this year is not just any year, it's the most important year since our nation's founding. Choose a wireless carrier that shares your values. Choose Patriot Mobile.
The world is about to shift. Banks are going cashless globally with the emergence of central bank digital currency, which will bring with it programmable money and the ability to turn on or off your purchasing power based on your digital social profile. It's like the equivalent of spyware in your bank account. You need to get out of the system with the world's safest and most precious assets, silver and gold. Call Kirk Elliott Precious Metals at 720-605-3900. That's 720-605-3900.
720-605-3900. Give Kirk Elliott a call. He's a terrific supporter of Patriot TV. And for those of you who want to put a little portion of your assets in gold and silver, Kirk Elliott Precious Metals, among the largest dealers in the United States. Great people to work with. Hey, Joe, we're back. I printed out a couple things, again, off Gateway Pundit, and these are just some observations that I'd like your commentary on, because you and I were talking a little bit, in the green room before the show. This representation that the Democratic Party is putting forth to the American people, it's not a country I'm familiar with. I mean, besides the thing Biden talked about, all his lies, he firmly tied Kamala Harris to their record. They lied about immigration. I mean, Joe, they basically were advocating voting rights for illegal immigrants last night. What did you make of that and their just full throttled support for illegal immigration?
Mhm. Yeah, these people they're just so terrible in that regard. Today there was a report that came out, and this is after they came out with this information last night or whatever, but something like more than 300,000 children now are missing that have crossed that border under this regime, the Biden-Harris regime. And we don't know where they're at. 300 and some thousand children now. The list, before we'd heard the number 85,000. Now it's 300,000, averaging, it sounds like around a couple 100,000 a year, children that we have no idea where they're at right now that have crossed that border. And some of these children, they said, came on their own and they're 5 years old and things like that. It doesn't make sense. It's terrible. And I think we're seeing what's happening. And that, to me, that's kind of the sick stuff. So we already talked about their big push last night's for abortion, which is really killing God's children, babies, the infants. That's just really one of the most sickest things you could do. And then they go from that then to illegal immigration, where they've got children crossing the border that we've lost. We have no idea where they're at or who they're with or who had them last. No idea. And not sure if that's intentional or not. Apparently it is, because they don't seem to even want to tell us about it. And then we've got, millions of people that have crossed this border that we don't know who they are. And we know that some have crossed this border that are on the watch list, or at least were individuals that they needed to vet more, better. I talked to somebody today that said they used to have like an hour and a half interview process with people when they cross the border. Now it's down to 4 minutes. So in 4 minutes, our agents are supposed to figure out whether this person that's coming across the border is telling them the truth and whether or not they're a terrorist or not. It's unbelievable what they're doing with the border. It's just such a horrible thing. Americans, this isn't America. And again, economically, they're trying to destroy America with policies that are going to hurt us even more, even after this inflation, which I think is way low. They say 20%, right? And I think there should be a fast food index, because these working young Americans that go to the get fast food to make it by, do it for lunch, whatever they have to do, these costs are unbelievable. You talk to a young family with a couple little kids on Happy Meals, and they'll say prices have gone up 100% since these guys took over, and pretty much across the board in restaurants. So the 20%, not sure how they calculate that, but inflation, economically, with this border, it's really sick stuff that's going on. It's not just bad policy; it's evil. It's evil policy.
Yeah. And Joe, that doesn't take into account, like on the border, all the drugs that come across that border. The fact you mentioned all the children. We have laws in this country where they have to be housed, educated. And if they get sick, hospitals have to care for them. I mean, the strain on the overall system in the United States is incredible. I saw a government statistic that said the cost over the last year of illegal immigration was $400 billion. That is a gigantic sum of money. And then, Joe, you talked about the economics, the communist tactics that Harris initially talked about. And there's no way to sugarcoat it, folks. Those economic policies were communist Marxist in theory. Hell, the Russians even abandoned those because they didn't work. Venezuela tried it, they didn't work. The government report came out and said if these policies were implemented, it would increase the debt by 1.7 trillion. So, Joe, you're getting a massive emphasis on abortion and the damage that does. People crossing the border, all these children that you talked about that are missing. God knows where they are. Are they being enslaved, working in some unknown factory? We don't know, because they're gone missing. And then you tie in just these other radical policies. And we haven't even gotten to some of the rest of the stuff yet. We had Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez talking last night, another bizarre, angry rant. How could I leave out Hillary Clinton, of course? I mean, Joe, they tried to make the theme of this convention, it's all the joy. I didn't see a lot of joy last night. I saw a lot of anger last night, Joe, it was not contrived. I mean, these people are really ticked off, and this quote joy that they're trying to sell down the American public's throat. I don't know. Maybe I missed something last night.
Mm. I heard it came out that the Nazis did this. They had a campaign of joy back in the 1930s. Did you hear that too? It's unbelievable.
Yes,
and I heard that same number on 450 million or billion to pay for these illegals every year. I mean, and we've got a deficit every quarter of like $1 trillion. So at least we can knock a couple $100 billion off that. And we throw these numbers around like they're nothing, but in the U.S. corporations, there aren't many U.S. corporations that make $1 billion, not many at all that make $1 billion in profits, let alone in revenues. It's insane how they throw these numbers around like it's no big deal. These idiots that have no idea about probably even what an asset or a liability is, they're blowing stuff all the time on all sorts of stuff. We have no idea where this money's going. It's a sham what's going on. I used to oversee $1 billion block of business in my financial reporting days. I couldn't stay on top of that. Nobody's on top of a $7 trillion budget. Nobody knows what's going on there. God only knows how much grift is happening today, right now, despite all the things we've already mentioned.
Well, let's carry on, a little bit further here. I mean, it seems the other thing that the Democratic Party it is very good at, there's no question about it, Joe, is the identity politics aspect of it. But, when they called Mount Rushmore racist last night, I'm Mount Rushmore, Ray, what the hell are they talking about? I mean, Joe, to add to the strangeness, I don't even want to use the word weird because that gives too much credit to Tim Walz, but just the oddities. I'm looking at the Hamas wing, Joe, of the Democratic Party parading through Chicago. And here again, the Democrats, they don't want walls down in Mexico, but boy, they built a fortress around that United Center in Chicago. And look what happened yesterday. Even the Hamas wing of the Democratic Party tried to break through a gate. They did break through it. 14 people got arrested. Joe, what do you make of the Hamas wing of the party? I mean, here Blinken's over in Israel and Qatar right now, trying to convince the Israelis and Hamas to sign a peace deal. And yet the Hamas wing of the Democratic Party, they are not happy with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and they are making their feelings very well known on the streets of Chicago.
Yeah, it's really bizarre, and the Democrats got themselves in a real pickle, I think, by choosing both sides. They're trying to do that, but I don't know how they can do that. I think they want money from their Jewish donors here in the U.S. and abroad, and yet they're also at the same time trying to appease these individuals from the Middle East, from some of these terrorist nations. So it's a no-win situation, and then that mirrors their policy over there too in Israel, where they're trying to I guess try to stop this thing after this massive invasion into Israel that we saw a year ago now, almost a year to the day. These I had Michelle Bachmann on my show. I have his show weekly as well during the weekdays. Now it's at Lindell TV. But what Michelle Bachmann, the former U.S. representative, said is she said a couple things I thought were profound. But she said one is the Biden administration is the administration of death. And I was like, when she said it, I was shocked. I'm like, what? And the more I thought about it, and this was way back during Afghanistan, the Afghanistan withdrawal. And you're like, what? The administration of death. But now you look at it, look at these policies we just talked about. Abortion, terrible economy, illegal immigration, and fentanyl crossing the border, and then overseas with foreign policies, whether it be in Ukraine, perhaps Taiwan, China pretty soon, or Israel and Palestine. And she said, we're the big fools because we feed both sides of the Israeli-Palestine conflict. Trump came in, stopped giving money to terrorist nations that were providing money to martyrs of that were related to the to terrorists, and so that ended money going to these Palestinians and these terrorist nations. Biden's given to both sides. We're feeding the frenzy. It's insanity. It's according to Michelle Bachmann. It's crazy. What's going on here? We're just killing people. Is all we're doing. Same thing in Ukraine.
I think Michelle Bachmann's onto something there, because as you just mentioned, Joe, when you talk about those policies, whether it was the disastrous exit from Afghanistan, which, oh, by the way, folks, Kamala Harris, the vice president, was in the room when the decision was made. And again, you bring up a great point, Joe. I mean, how many people have been killed by the drugs that have come into this country? The crime that has led to senseless murders. I mean, Eric Adams, the other day, mayor of New York, the Hamas wing of the Democratic Party is protesting in New York, and he said, we've spent $5 billion on illegal immigrants in the city of New York. Imagine what they could have done, police, fire, community services, health, whatever. But no, they end up spending $5 billion just in New York City alone. Joe, it's astounding. And when you bring up the points that you brought, a lot of people are thinking, Mark, and I hear this all the time. They say, Mark, with all these issues that you're talking about on Election Edge, why is this race even close? Well, that's a tease, folks. We're going to take a 90-second break, but when we come back, Joe and I are going to go through it. We're going to put the election map up there, and then we're going to talk about a little bit about polling, where the race stands right now, and what it's going to take for Donald Trump to pull out this win against an opponent he did not planning on running against. See you in 90 seconds.
Don't let them win. Patriot TV is committed to delivering the truth. America's new network for patriots is growing fast, and we'd love you to join us as a member of Patriot TV. Your support makes it possible for us to continue to deliver unbiased reporting, thought-provoking discussions, and insights you won't find anywhere else. From in-depth interviews to behind-the-scenes footage, Patriot TV brings you closer to the voices shaping our nation's future. Whether it's political developments, cultural shifts, or global affairs, Patriot TV keeps you informed and empowered. As a member of Patriot TV, you'll get perks like personal invitations to exclusive Patriot TV events, where you can gather and network with like-minded Americans. We'll also host online events throughout the year with General Flynn, who's committed to host live Q&A webinars where callers like you can ask him questions and get real answers. Access to these events will be members only, so go to patriot.tv, click on Become a Member. It's fast and easy. We have a great membership option starting at just $9.99 a month, or save with our annual membership for only $99, or take advantage of the best value, the 2-year membership for just $159. Go to patriot.tv, click on Become a Member. It's fast and easy. Do your part to make sure the truth gets out to all patriots and help ensure future programming. Become a member today. Just go to patriot.tv, click on Become a Member, join today.
And we're back with Joe Hoft. Joe, let me ask you a question. You and I both follow these polls very closely. We see Real Clear Politics has an average of polling showing Kamala Harris with about a 1.5 lead. The betting markets have this race 52 Harris, 46 Trump, extremely close. But what's even more just sort of crazy is, Joe, these swing states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada. Joe, those swing states are generally within even to plus 1 or 2 points. Now, let's sort of go through state by state here on these swing states, and I'd like to get your analysis. And let's sort of start with, the blue wall, as the Democrats like to call it, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. How are you seeing those states right now, with Trump looking a little better, I think, in Pennsylvania? But how do you see it based upon your review of the polls right now, Joe?
Well, I got to tell you, I'm more of a proponent personally, and I'm sorry about this, Mark, but this is my belief. Ann Coulter wrote a book back in around 2000. It was called Slander. It was about the Democrats and liberals at that time and how they used polls to manipulate. And we dug into I personally dug into the polls in 2016 when Hillary was running, and we start tearing them apart. I could see they'd provide data on their polling, and they'd say how many Democrats and how many Republicans. And what we could tell then is that it was like a 55-45 split on Democrats to Republicans, and yet Hillary was winning by 52-48 or whatever. And so when we started digging into the numbers, we could see that there was some manipulation going on, that they are claiming that Hillary's ahead, and yet they're giving her a big advantage in the population that's being sampled. So the first thing about any of these polls that I would say is, personally, I wouldn't trust them at all. And I'm sorry about saying that, Mark. I know we'd like to get into some of the stuff. I've studied this stuff since 2016. We've, in 2020, they stopped even providing the data on the polls. And then I think, quite frankly, some of the data is just garbage. So what they do now is then they go back to 2020 and use the results from 2020, where I think clearly the numbers don't mirror the reality of the situation. So if you use the same population of voters from 2020 today, then you're going to come out with again a Democrat lead, because that's what the end results showed. But what they're not, and what I'm confident on is based on my experience in the corporate world and auditing, et cetera, is that our elections, they're just not certifiable. And that's why I came up with this 3-book series on the steal, where I said the election was stolen. As I went through my first book was on what was leading up to the election. Like I mentioned, the rallies and stuff indicated Trump was going to win in a landslide. The middle piece book was on all the things that occurred. And as a corporate auditor, as I went through each one of these areas, whether it was systems, whether it was data, whether it was access to information, whatever it might be, at the end of each chapter, I'd say, I started realizing this thing shouldn't have been certified. And so our problem is as Republicans, we think, we need to do more. There's this belief out there that we need to get more people signed up. That's great. We need to do that. Or we need to get people kicked, off those voter rolls that aren't real. Absolutely. We need to do that. And, but there's even more than that we need to do, because, I've worked with a team here where we've looked at and I'm kind of going off track here, I know, and I'm sorry, Mark, bring me back if you need to.
Please stick with it.
I've got some experts, and we've looked at this. I mean, some really, really sharp people that I brought together and said, how can we win this 2024 election? And I shared this on Bannon's War Room yesterday. And what we did is kind of similar to what I would do with an audit. We start off with here's our population. Here's like all the states. Here's all the everything that's going on in all these states in the election process, similar to what we would do in a major corporation that's multinational, like the one I worked at. And then we decided, okay, what are these key processes, is what we call it, these key areas that need to be that are involved in an election process. And then we looked at all these key, what we call controls, or areas that must be in place in order to validate the election. And as a corporate auditor, I want to make sure I have total access to everything. I wouldn't sign off on anything in the corporate world if you wouldn't let me see it. So we went through this list, and we found that 2/3 of all these controls aren't even in place right now today. So where do we start with this? We've decided to work on voter rolls, try to clean those up as much as possible. There's groups of people trying to bring in more Republicans. That's great. In Florida, you probably heard, they just recently noted that there's now more than 1 million more Republicans than Democrats in Florida. I do believe it's related to policies, but it's also related to a guy that I know that's been running reports and shipping them out to all these local patriots across the state in multiple counties. And they would go to these supervisors of elections and say, hey, look at this list of people. Their addresses don't match the postal service, and they've been eliminated from these voter rolls. Like, I believe 1 million or so people that were Democrats that have been taken off the rolls through hard work. This same group, it's called the People's Audit with Chris Jersky. He's also working in Texas, Georgia, North Carolina, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. So there's where we can really, gain some, I think some headway there. But the other effort that we've decided to push forward with is just to if we can't get to the machines, and if we're going to leave these machines in our elections, then we're going to have to really guard what I say, protect the paper. We've got to make sure every ballot that comes in is legit, that no ballots come in that aren't legit. And then we put perfect chain of custody on these so that nobody can insert anything. We fill these various facilities, precincts with observers that don't let anything get by. That's what we're going to need so that we can protect the paper, because ultimately, if there's machines like some people believe that are manipulating the data, that's fine, but ultimately you've got to have the paper that matches the end results. And so that's our effort, is going to be in focusing on making sure the ballots are secure, they're legitimate, and they're valid, and that the counts equal the people that came in. You don't
Joe,
have a bunch of...
And Joe, one thing I think the Republicans looking forward, not backward, in other words, learn from the past, but looking forward to what's happening coming up here. You hear people say it's 77 days to election day, Joe, but it's really not. It's in some states less than 30 days from now, people are going to be voting. Actually, some people will be voting before Trump and Harris have their first debate scheduled for September 10th. So I'm glad you brought those points up, because we have 3,200 counties, I think, across the United States. And I think Republicans have done a damn good effort between hiring the lawyers, hiring the poll workers. Look, on the technology side, I'm not qualified to talk about that because it's not my area of expertise, but some of the experts that we have brought on Election Edge have said things are improving, but they're not perfect. So on the polling, I want to address a couple things that you brought up, and you bring up great points. Back in 2016, we went into election night and Hillary Clinton had a 99% chance to win, according to the pollsters. Well, we all know what happened. Donald Trump was undercounted by, what was it, Joe, 8 or 9 points that night? A crazy amount.
Right.
Why were they doing that? Sampling size, exactly what you talked about.
Sure.
Got a little bit better in 2020, where Joe Biden was favored, according to pollsters, the night of the election. He's going to win by like 8. Well, he won by 4.5, according to final official figures, 3.5 point difference. Trump has even come out and said, look, I tend to perform better than polls show. And when you, one thing I do like about Real Clear Politics, they'll take the mainstream media and they'll take what I call the legacy media data, but they also take data from Scott Rasmussen, who's been among the most accurate pollsters over the last 5 to 6 election cycles. They take Robert Cahaley of Trafalgar Group. Both of those pollsters, irony of irony, Joe, they've got President Trump in the lead, and not by a small amount right now. And I don't know if you caught some of the weekend shows, but Martha Raddatz, a reporter for ABC, she's moderated debates before. I noticed the mainstream media was trying to interview people who they thought were going to be Harris voters, and almost to a person. No, they turned out and they were for Donald Trump for various reasons. So I don't. Again, we say this all the time. Let's not put a lot of faith in these polls, but let's recognize them for what they are: a tool, a snapshot.
But they're Joe, also propaganda, Mark. The thing, I this weekend I was watching a women's basketball game. Crazy. I've never done this before, but I just fell in love with this player, Caitlin Clark. I watch her games like, wow, this is something, seeing her play. And after the game, it was on ABC. They had the local news, and the first thing they show is polls. Kamala Harris is up on Trump. Blam, blam, blam. It's like shooting in your face there. And I shut it off. I'm like, my God, this is why I don't watch this anymore. And Rasmussen, I agree, he's very reputable. I've had some discussions with these guys, love these guys. They're doing a great job. I challenged them in the past on some of these numbers. I said, those numbers aren't right. I just said, I just don't believe they're right. I'm just more convicted just from talking to people that and you can look around, you can see the numbers aren't what they're saying they are in these other polls at all, even in Rasmussen at times. But these guys do a great job. But here's the thing that I love about Rasmussen. He came out with a poll about 1.5 years ago where he showed that 62% of Americans believe that the 2020 election was rigged. It was stolen. He had another poll a short time later, 65 or so percent of Americans believe that January 5th was a setup. Now they're even getting up to numbers that are showing around 70% of people believe we're living in a police state right now. These numbers are shocking, but I think they're consistent with the majority of Americans that are behind President Trump and that are conservative. I believe about 2/3 of Americans are really in this park. And when you look at some of these polls over and over from Rasmussen, in some of these areas, you'll see this 60-40, 60 or 70-30 split. And I just think that's the real numbers in America today. But we've got to work around a lot of wrongdoing and stuff. And here, my point on being a corporate auditor, I never accepted anything that I couldn't absolutely validate. If you're going to give me something, I want to know where it's from, what it's from. If you're going to tell me these numbers are here, I want to see every invoice. And that's what we don't have in our election process. And I shared this the other day. I've done audits in communist China and asked them for information. And those people that I was auditing and the processes I was auditing, they handed me that stuff gladly. And most corporations have rules that you have to work with auditors. Our election process does not provide for that. That's why it's not certifiable, because too much shenanigans is going on. We saw it in 2020 with vans underneath Detroit in the middle of the night, people in Philadelphia kicked out of the room for 3 days, and truck drivers full of ballots from New York to Pennsylvania. That stuff is not transparency, and we can't certify that kind of stuff ever again, because that's the key for us winning this election as much as anything, I believe.
Joe, are you confident, or let me rephrase that, are you more confident that based upon what the party is doing to put people in these precincts, to keep an eye out for things that you're making reference, do you think the Republicans heading into this election, 2024, have learned the lessons from the past and at least are in a better position to have integrity within the election? That's what I'm trying to get to right now.
Yeah. The first step in any issue or problem or whatever it might be, even addiction, is you've got to know what the problem is. And I think there we are where we weren't 4 years ago. We had no idea how broken this process is. That's the first step. And then the next step is figuring out ways to address it. And that's where we're at right now.
Okay, good. I'm happy to hear you say that. I want to add one other piece about polling before we take our final break. Joe, you always hear the campaigns talk about their internal polling versus the public polling. And I don't know if you caught this or not, but Trump's people have been saying that their internal polling is reflecting better numbers than the public polling. And the Harris campaign actually finally, I mean, if this is true, and again, with coming out of that campaign, you never know what's true because, she doesn't talk and never doesn't do the press interviews, no press conference. But some campaign spokespeople have said their internal numbers and this, quote, Harris honeymoon, this glorious optimism, is not reflected in their internal polling. So interesting dynamic there. Trump's staff thinks he's doing better. Harris's staff, maybe not so much. So will the Harris bounce stop here at this convention? My bet is that it will. She may have already peaked pre-convention. I do not see a bump coming out of this with her because, Joe, the media coverage astronomically in her favor, like 80% positive, whereas on Trump, it's like 80% negative. We're going to take our final break, but when we come back, I want to address that media issue because that's a big deal, and that has a lot of influence on undecided voters. Be back in 90 seconds.
Throughout history, the spirit of patriotism has prevailed. The battles may have changed, but the values remain the same. Today, in 2024, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment where the call for unity, freedom, and a better future echoes louder than ever. For more than 10 years, Patriot Mobile has been committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service. It's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream. Because this year, is not just any year. It's the most important year since our nation's founding. Choose a wireless carrier that shares your values. Choose Patriot Mobile.
Attention patriotic businesses. Do you want to see your sales skyrocket by selling your products or services to like-minded patriots? Well, if you're an advertiser who embodies the timeless principles of freedom, liberty, and patriotism, look no further than Patriot TV. Our viewers are responsive, economically active patriots who are committed to supporting businesses like yours that align with their values. For more information on advertising on America's new network of proud American businesses, email us at advertise@patriot.tv.
And we're back with Joe Hoft. Joe, one other comment about a small victory today about Pennsylvania. No more naked ballots. Those are the ones where they're not sealed in the envelope. A judge ruled that those ballots are not going to count. So I thought that was a favorable ruling for us today. But let's dive into this media coverage, Joe. You're a media guy. Besides being an auditor, you're involved with Gateway Pundit, a great conservative website. Have you ever seen this type of media coverage? I know it was bad when it was Clinton and Trump, but Joe, it seems to me that it's worse this time because literally she's getting 80, 81, 82% positive coverage. And Donald Trump can't say anything without the legacy or mainstream media criticizing him. What do you make of this, and what can Trump do to overcome it?
Well, yeah, I think you know what like I mentioned earlier with the Rasmussen polls and stuff, something's happening that people are believing the way that they are today, and have this, for example, the perception that 62% of people think the 2020 election was stolen, or 65% believe that January 6th was a setup. People aren't getting that information from this mainstream media, as you're pointing out, Mark. This mainstream media is a joke, like popping on the other day, first time in years that I've seen local news. And here's first thing, these polls just pushed right on you, saying Kamala's ahead. It's outrageous. Americans are seeing that, and they're not going there anymore. They're not going to cable news anymore as well. I believe Fox News, after Tucker and Bongino and others are gone, they're done. And so people are coming to sites like this in droves, and because people want the truth. And whether it be here or Gateway Pundit or wherever it might be for their information, they're not going there because they know they're not going to get the truth. And so I think that's the great news of all of this, is that somehow people are getting this idea that 62% of the American voters believe the election was stolen in 2020. So it ain't coming from from the mainstream media. It's coming from sites like this and shows like this, Mark, which gives us a lot of hope. Americans want the truth, and they will fight to get it. And that's where they'll come here. They'll just say, I don't want that anymore. That's what I do. So it's work, that's real.
Point well taken. And again, whether it's Gateway Pundit, Patriot.tv, I could list a lot of conservative outlets. I mean, they're popular for a reason, folks. Just as an example, the show we're giving you today. I mean, Joe and I may not agree on every point, but you're hearing positions unedited. There was no rules, that no one says, hey, you can't do this, you can't do that. We try to present these facts so that the American people can make educated decisions. And Joe, one educated decision that they're making, and this is really not a debatable item, about 2/3 of Americans believe the country's moving in the wrong direction. I mean, it has been consistently like that really for the past year. So I'm not telling people something they haven't heard. Yes, what does that translate into? Well, the price of eggs is super high. The price of bacon is super high. The price of a steak is super high. Go out and try to buy car insurance if you can get it. That's super high. And that ties into Joe's point he made earlier in the show that a lot of cases, inflation's higher than that 20%. So when you factor in all of that, the high prices, all the things happening at our border, Democrats have their issues that they pound the table on. Republicans have issues they pound the table on. The key, Joe, is going to be that sliver of independents. There's maybe 15 to 20% that had not made up their mind yet, but in those 7 key states, because that's where the election's going to be decided. And just for the sake of how tight this is, Madam Producer, if you could put that election map up on the screen. Okay, now again, this is from the staff at Election Edge. This is how we see it right now. Okay, and Joe, I'm going to add a couple things to it. This map shows Trump ahead in Nevada and winning 2 states that he absolutely has to win this election, which is Pennsylvania and Georgia. Now, in the 2020 election and in 2016, Donald Trump won North Carolina by fairly tight margins, but they were in the 2 to 3% range. So a lot of people had North Carolina in that red camp prior to Harris getting involved because Biden was up 4 or 5 points. So right now we've got it as neutral. We also have Arizona as neutral right now because we've seen some polling that shows Trump ahead. We've seen some polling that shows Harris ahead. But if you look at those key states there's one blue state that could have been and probably should have been a gray, and that's Wisconsin, because, Joe, Wisconsin in the 2016 election was decided by less than 20,000 votes, and in the 2020 election, it was the same situation. And I've got some polling data here out of Wisconsin. You know, it literally, multiple polls have had it tied up, 47-47. But here's why I think there's a chance Wisconsin could go to Trump, and that's really based on the economy. Joe, we've talked about it a lot, but the economy in most elections, it's not just the fact that the unemployment rate's ticking up a little bit. It's still relatively low in the mid 4s. But the fact that a lot of people are having to work 2 jobs, 3 jobs, and when you tack on the fact that the Biden-Harris administration, inflation's up 20% while they are at the helm. Joe, I just think at the end of the day, between that issue and where it plays in importance and the fact that the Democratic Party and their voters, they're representing either the low end of the totem pole or the very wealthy, I think that vast majority of Americans that are sitting in the middle who are feeling this pain, the pain from gas prices, the pain from food prices, the overall, I'm going to use a Jimmy Carter term, the malaise. Joe, your thoughts on it based on where the state of this race is?
Well, I think you've got some great points there. There's great people in Wisconsin. I think it's probably, I believe most states are just red and we're just being fooled by it, quite frankly. You see these rallies at Trump's. There's various indicators outside of that. We looked at signage. We looked at social media in 2016 and Trump was crushing Hillary. And then they monkeyed around with social media the next 4 years. So we couldn't use that same measurement. But there's other things we can look at. And when you see yardage signs, when everything's Trump, I still haven't hardly seen a Biden sticker out there. I haven't seen a Kamala Harris one yet. And so there's various indicators that tell us that we're doing pretty well. And, the thought that hit me, you mentioned pain. I was thinking about this, during one of our previous segments. Got a good buddy. His son died of a fentanyl overdose. And he called me one afternoon on a Saturday and told me how he'd found his son in his basement bedroom and he was dead. And my friend and I just wept. We just wept like little children. When I heard that, I didn't know what to say. That's not joy. That's not joy. That's the hell that we're living through right now. And I really believe that everything these guys do is destructive. It's not helping America. It's hurting America. And we've got to keep continuing to get the message out. Look at this. Look at what's going on. Of course, your lives aren't better. And they're going to be even worse if we go through this again. Stand up, volunteer to help, do all you can, because don't rely on anybody else. You've got to do this. You've got to stand up. You've got to go and be a poll watcher, poll worker, whatever it takes to make sure that this next election is fair and transparent. And because there's going to be no joy in the future at all. That's a lie. Oh, that's just a lie.
Oh, you're exactly right, Joe. And again, think about this for a minute. We talked about what's happening in Wisconsin, and that's real. But it's also real, Joe, in states like Pennsylvania and states like Georgia. I mean, Georgia had been a solid red state up until the 2020 election. We know Trump lost it by about 12,000 votes. Pennsylvania, he won it by 40, lost it by 60. But these positions that Comrade Harris has on fracking in Pennsylvania, and again, you've seen, we've played it on this show many, many times, that Dave McCormick ad that references Harris's positions when she was running for the nomination. She ran basically to the left of Bernie Sanders. And Joe, we got about a minute left. Her position, she's trying to bring it back to the center, but I don't think that's going to fool the people of Georgia, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania, because Joe, I'm going to give you the final comments here, but if he wins Pennsylvania, Georgia, and North Carolina, Donald Trump will be our 47th president. You got 40 seconds, Joe. Close it out for me here.
Yeah, I agree. And Trump had a great message in 2016 talking about the these blue states or the Rust Belt and how all these jobs have been pushed overseas. And I believe that. I think our politicians are to blame for that. It's not our products, it's not our manufacturers, it's not our people. It's our politicians that put policies in place like 35% taxes on corporations that make it very difficult for us to even stay in business. So we've got to go with the real positive policies that the left are not going to provide for us. It's Trump all the way.
Joe Hoft, it has been a pleasure having you on the show today. Your economic background, your political background. Thank you, and I hope you'll come back again. Much appreciated.
Thank you. I'd love.
Okay, that's it, folks. Be back tomorrow on Election Edge. See you tomorrow.